Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you all. China's countermeasures against Japanese lawmakers target Japan's sore spot in Osaka. Additionally, China's defense minister, Dong Jun, warned the US Secretary of Defense not to meddle unnecessarily, while Wang Yi is about to give a lesson. On the eve of the Biden-Xi summit, China noted the US has something it wants. Recently, high-level officials from China and the US started to make contact, but the US side has been acting unusually low-key. According to a Xinhua report on September 10th, Minister Dong Jun video called US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on September 9th. Dong Jun told Austin the US military keep communication channels open. He said building a stable, positive military relationship based on equality, respect, peaceful coexistence requires mutual respect for core interests. Any attempt to support Taiwan independence with force, use Taiwan to contain China, any interference will be thwarted. Dong Jun said China is committed to working with regional countries to safeguard peace and stability in the South China Sea. He firmly opposes infringement and provocations by certain countries and deliberate instigation by countries outside the region. Since Trump resumed office earlier this year, US-Chinese military relations have not shown any signs of easing, even after meetings between the two defense ministers. The last time they spoke was, as reported by the Daily News, on August 29th last year, 46 days ago. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin proposed a phone call with Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun. But the Chinese side only read the message and did not respond. This time, Dong Jun finally agreed to a phone call with the US side, but after the meeting, the US did not immediately release any information. It was only after the Chinese side released the news a day later that the US side made an announcement. It is believed that this was because during the call, Dong lectured Lloyd Austin, telling him not to support Taiwan independence or use Taiwan to contain China, so the US originally did not want to make it public. But after Xinhua News Agency published the report, the US Department of Defense also released a statement. The statement said that Lloyd Austin and Dong Jun had a phone conversation, and Lloyd Austin made it clear that the United States has no intention of having a conflict with China, nor does it intend to overthrow or strangle China, the People's Republic of China. At the same time, Lloyd Austin also frankly stated that the US considers the Asia-Pacific region a priority strategic area, that the US has vital interests there and will resolutely safeguard those interests. What the Chinese authorities are dissatisfied with is that the US no longer provides reassurance, and recently, the US military delivered drones to Taiwan. On September 18th, the US issued an announcement saying it had approved the sale to Taiwan. This includes 720 sets of Switchblade, 300 and 291 sets of Altius 600M attack drones. The first batch of Altius drones was already delivered on August 4th this year. From the announcement of the sale to Taiwan to the delivery of the first batch, it took less than 14 months. A source in the Taiwanese military said, compared to the repeated delivery delays of various missile systems the US has sold to Taiwan, this time the delivery was exceptionally fast. The drone set a record for the fastest delivery of US-supplied weapons to Taiwan in the past 20 years. In addition, US personnel brought what is known as the military gate to Taiwan, the Stinger missile system. During Taiwan's Hanquang military exercises this July, it was repeatedly deployed. The US military? These actions have caused great dissatisfaction in mainland China. As a result, Dong Jun harshly criticized Hagel-Seis, while Hagel-Seis did not dare to respond forcefully. Instead, he said that the US has no intention of clashing with China or of overthrowing China. It is believed this was said in passing. He explained the renaming of the US Department of Defense to the Department of War, stating that the US has no intention of going to war with China. Among them, one day after the US Secretary of Defense's call on September 10th, Foreign Minister Wang Yi spoke with US Secretary of Defense Rubio. Wang Yi said that for these two great ships, China and the US, to move forward together without veering off course or losing speed, it is essential to firmly adhere to the strategic guidance of the two heads of state and to unwaveringly implement their important consensus. The recent negative words and actions taken by the US have harmed China's legitimate rights and interests, interfered in China's internal affairs, and are not conducive to the improvement and development of China-US relations. China firmly opposes this, especially on issues involving China's core interests, such as Taiwan. The US must be cautious in its words and actions, the news report stated. Both China and the US believe that this phone call was timely, necessary, and productive. In fact, during the call, Wang Yi directly criticized the US for its recent negative words and actions. This echoes Dong Jun's harsh criticism of the US yesterday, saying that the US is no longer trustworthy. The US response was similarly low-key, After the call between Wang Yi and Blinken, the US State Department's principal deputy spokesperson, Vedant Patel, said at a press briefing that Blinken emphasized the importance of open and constructive communication between the two sides on a range of bilateral issues during the call. Patel said that this meeting between the two foreign ministers was a follow-up to their earlier meeting in Singapore earlier this year. Beyond that, Patel was unwilling to disclose further details about the conversation between the two. To summarize first, the US military has repeatedly requested dialogue with the Chinese military. China's Minister of Defense Dong Jun finally agreed to the dialogue, but issued a stern warning to the US side not to use force to create trouble. Second, the news agencies did not mention whether the call between Wang Yi and Blinken was initiated by either side. That is to say, whether the call was initiated by the Chinese side or if both sides were willing to have the conversation. The Chinese side may have felt that, after the call between Dong Jun and Lloyd Austin, there was still more to be said in criticizing the US's negative words and actions, which is why they arranged this call. Third, the US side responded in a low-key manner to China's tough stance, especially Blinken's response, which was even more brief, essentially saying nothing at all. This shows that they are all acting according to Trump's wishes first. Right now, Trump doesn't want to fall out with China, so he doesn't dare to talk back to Trump either. It's clear that he has something he wants, perhaps even hoping to do so, on the eve of his visit to China. During the Asia-Pacific Economic and Trade Summit, he wants to meet with President Xi first. The APEC leaders' meeting is informal. The meeting will be held on October 30th in Gyeongju, South Korea. The countdown to the meeting has already begun, but there is still considerable uncertainty as to whether the China-US HAP leaders' meeting will actually take place. After the events in Beijing in March, Trump's statements have appeared quite friendly toward China. He even praised China's military parade, calling it a beautiful ceremony and saying it was very impressive. He also said that his relationship with China is very good. This statement stands in stark contrast to his previously tough rhetoric toward China. For example, in recent phone calls between the Chinese and US defense and foreign ministers, the Chinese side has taken a tough stance. If the US side cannot meet the demands of the Chinese side, it is feared that even a meeting between Chinese and US leaders at APEC may not be able to happen. However, compared to the original idea of a China-US meeting, the meeting between Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was clearly even less likely after South Korean President Lee Jae-myung took office. Since then, North Korea has repeatedly stated its refusal to engage in dialogue with South Korea and has clearly rejected invitations from the South. Kim Jong-un. Regarding the proposal for Kim Jong-un to attend the APEC meeting, recent US and Japanese media have revealed a story about the United States. Navy SEALs once infiltrated North Korea in the early years. The news of the failed infiltration will undoubtedly intensify tensions between the US and North Korea. The person leaking this information seems to want to make it even harder for the Trump-Kim summit to happen. Trump loves to hold leader summits the most. Now, of course, he is even more eager for a meeting with President Xi to succeed. That way, he naturally wouldn't dare to provoke China. In addition, China is also unafraid to exert strong pressure on Japan. On September 8th, the Chinese Communist Party announced countermeasures against Japanese Senator Ishihara. He is banned from entering China, and his assets in China have been frozen. His business dealings with China are also restricted. The CCTV public account Rubio Talks has provided an in-depth analysis. He said this is a public counter-sanction by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in recent years, a list. This is the first time it has targeted a Japanese politician. This time, the countermeasure against Ishihara was announced as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs order, which is not common. And up until now, this has been rare. So far, China has only announced counter-sanctions through Ministry of Foreign Affairs orders 14 times. 12 of these were against the United States, one against Canada, and the other is this time targeting Japan. The target of this countermeasure, Ishihara, was originally Chinese. He went to study in Japan at the age of 16 and became a Japanese citizen at 45. After that, he was involved in almost every sensitive issue related to China-Japan relations. He has consistently ignored the facts, recklessly criticizing China, and even denying the authenticity of the Nanjing massacre. Some people think that China's sanctions against Ishihara are useless, but Rao Guangxi analyzed the impact of sanctioning Ishihara. In July this year, at the age of 63, Ishihara was elected to the Japanese House of Councillors for the first time as a proportional representative. In other words, as of September, he had only been in office for 2 months. So as a proportional representative, a senator is not a candidate in a specific electoral district. They don't directly defeat opponents, but instead rely on the political party they belong to. Seats are allocated based on the proportion of votes the party receives nationwide. His party, the Japan Innovation Party, mainly relies on seats from the Osaka district. And the development of the city of Osaka is closely connected to China. From a business and trade perspective, Osaka has long been the logistics and wholesale center of Western Japan. It has the closest trade relations with China, and its economic structure accounts for a significant portion. A quarter of Osaka's wholesale and retail industry is highly dependent on Chinese tourists. For example, Shinsaibashi and Daimaru department store are well-known shopping centers. In the first quarter of this year, duty-free sales to Chinese tourists increased by 45% year-on-year. Therefore, if Osaka were to lose its connection with China, its economy would be hit first and hardest. And if a senator, whose seat depends on the Osaka constituency, were to personally cut off ties with China, how much political influence could they still maintain? This is something that the Ishin Party itself is surely well aware of. An even more typical example is this year's case. The preparations for the Osaka Expo began as early as May 2021. Osaka's major enterprises secured an international agreement with Japan through the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. A $75 million loan jointly provided by the bank was used for related construction along the coast. For many of Osaka's key projects, the funding chains are closely connected to China. It can be said that it was precisely the insightful figures within the Ishin Party who were driving this forward. If all these collaborations were to be completely severed, cutting off Shibin's ties with China, for someone who is dependent on them, it would be tantamount to political suicide for a senator elected in Osaka. And his party, the Ishin Party, would also consider keeping this person. In the party, this will have an impact on Osaka's economy and even the party's future votes. How great that impact will be, the conclusion is, China. When you strike a snake, you must hit its vital spot.